What if the most terrifying moment of your life turned into the greatest miracle? This is the emotional journey of Sam and Officer Lee, a story of love, despair, and faith. Sam's delivery turns into a life or death struggle, forcing the doctors to choose between saving mother or child. Lee, powerless and broken, clings only to prayer, begging his sister and Aunt Thwo for strength. Then, against all odds, a baby's cry pierces the silence, and joy floods in as Sam survives. Stay with us, subscribe now, and witness this unforgettable tale of sacrifice, miracle, and family. The white glare of the delivery room lights burned into Lee's eyes as he stood frozen at the doorway. The sharp scent of antiseptic clung to the air, mixing with the frantic rhythm of machines beeping and nurses rushing back and forth. On the bed lay Sam, her face pale, drenched in sweat, her breaths shallow and ragged. She clutched the sheets, her knuckles white, every contraction tearing through her body like waves determined to drag her under. Lee's heart pounded in his chest, each beat echoing like a hammer, threatening to split him apart. Then came the words that shattered him completely. "We may only be able to save the mother or the child." The doctor's tone was calm, clinical, but to Lee, it was a cruel strike of fate. His world spun, vision blurring as though the ground had opened beneath him. Save one and lose the other. His mind screamed at the impossible choice, yet his lips refused to move. He was a police officer, trained to face danger, to stare down criminals, to remain steady in chaos. But here, in this sterile room, he was nothing but a helpless man watching the woman he loved fade before his eyes. Lee stumbled into the hallway, his legs barely carrying him. His hands trembled as he pulled out his phone, searching for strength in the only way he knew. He dialed his sister, his voice breaking as soon as she answered. "Please," he whispered, tears choking him, "pray for Sam, pray for our baby." Before she could even respond, he was already calling Aunt Thoa, begging her too, his voice trembling, words tumbling out like fragments of desperation. He could no longer rely on his badge, his courage, or his training, only on faith, fragile and uncertain, yet the last thread keeping him from collapse. He pressed his back against the cold wall, slid down until he was sitting on the floor, head in his hands. Around him, footsteps echoed, distant voices called out instructions, but he heard nothing clearly. The only sound that mattered was Sam's faint cry of pain through the door. His tears fell unchecked, wetting his palms. For the first time in his life, the man known for his strength, his unshakable will, broke apart completely. All he could do was bow his head, close his eyes, and beg for a miracle, beg for the life of the woman who was his heart and the child who was their future. Lee stayed crouched in the hallway, his hands clasped so tightly that his knuckles ached, whispering the same desperate prayer over and over. His sister's voice, trembling with faith, echoed in his ear through the phone, and Aunt Thwai's words of comfort followed soon after. "Don't lose hope. God listens, even in the darkest hours." Their voices blended with his silent pleas, forming a fragile shield against the storm of fear battering his heart. Every second stretched into eternity, every muffled cry from the delivery room stabbing deeper into his chest. Inside, the doctors and nurses fought with fierce determination. The tension in the room was palpable. Commands were shouted, equipment rattled, and the air grew heavy with urgency. Sam's body was weak, her breaths shallow,
yet somewhere within her lay a spark of strength refusing to be extinguished. The medical team worked feverishly, pulling every ounce of skill, every fragment of willpower into the battle for 2 lives. The line between life and death was razor thin, and no one could predict which side they would land on. Lee pressed his forehead against the cold wall, eyes shut tight, as he whispered hoarsely, "Please, don't take them from me. Not her, not the baby. Let me keep them both." He had seen violence, crime, and tragedy in his years as a police officer, but nothing compared to this torment, this helplessness of waiting while the universe decided the fate of his family. His tears spilled freely, staining the floor as he trembled like a child lost in the dark. And then, through the suffocating silence that followed a final flurry of movement, came a sound so pure, so piercing, that it split the air and shattered the despair weighing on his chest. A baby's cry, high, thin, but alive. The sound struck Lee like lightning, jolting him to his feet. His heart surged with disbelief and relief. Every prayer he had uttered suddenly answered in that miraculous note. The door burst open, and a nurse stepped out with eyes glistening. "She's safe. They're both safe," she said, her voice soft but triumphant. Lee staggered forward, hardly able to breathe, hardly able to grasp the miracle that had just unfolded. Inside, Sam lay exhausted, her body trembling but her face radiant with the softest smile. Upon her chest, tiny and fragile, yet strong enough to cry out against the world, rested their child. Sam's weak arms curved protectively around the baby, her lips pressing against its downy head as tears of joy slid from the corners of her eyes. Lee stood frozen in the doorway, overwhelmed, watching the 2 pieces of his heart breathe together as one. His prayers had been answered. The miracle was real. For a moment, Lee could only stand there, his breath caught in his throat, as if the sight before him were too fragile to touch. Sam lay pale but glowing, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, yet bright with triumph. Against her chest rested their newborn, tiny fists curling and uncurling, its cries now softened into quiet whimpers as it nuzzled instinctively against the warmth of its mother. The world, with all its noise and cruelty, seemed to fall silent. All that existed was this moment, the woman he loved, alive, and the child they had prayed for, breathing. Unable to hold back any longer, Lee rushed to the bedside. His knees buckled as he sank beside them, one trembling hand brushing damp strands of hair from Sam's face. "You did it," he whispered, his voice breaking. Tears spilled freely down his cheeks, not of despair this time, but of overwhelming gratitude. He lowered his head, kissing her forehead with a reverence that words could never capture. "Thank you, my love. You've given us everything. You fought so hard." Sam smiled faintly, her lips quivering as she gazed at him through her tears. "She's here, Lee, she's here." Her voice was barely audible, yet it carried all the weight of victory, of love, of a bond forged through fire. She shifted slightly, cradling the newborn closer, and Lee reached out, wrapping his large, calloused hands around them both, as though to shield them from the world. The officer, who had faced criminals without flinching, now wept openly, holding his fragile family as if they might vanish if he let go. His heart swelled with awe at the tiny heartbeat pressed between them, the proof of a miracle granted. He could feel Sam's warmth, the rise and fall of her chest, the faint coo of their child, all the simple, precious signs of life. Thank you, Lee murmured, again, to both of them, his lips against the crown of the baby's head. Thank you for coming to me. Thank you for staying with me. You are my everything. The words tumbled out in a flood, each syllable soaked in devotion. Sam's fingers found his hand and squeezed weakly, her eyes shimmering with love. In that circle of arms, his strong embrace, her tender hold, and the tiny heartbeat between them, they became something unshakable. The ordeal was over, the pain endured, and what remained was a family bound not only by blood, but by prayers answered, by faith fulfilled, and by a love stronger than fear. For Lee, nothing else mattered. His world was right here, in his arms.
Hello, xin chào tất cả các khán giả của kênh Lý Tử Sam Review. Vậy là trong tập ngày hôm nay, dưới sự cầu nguyện của cảnh sát Ni, chị gái cảnh sát Ni và bác Trang, thì mẹ con Sam đã sinh thành công. Đó là một bé gái rất là đáng yêu và xinh đẹp. Mặc dù trong quá trình sinh nở có lúc xảy ra biến cố, nhưng mà cuối cùng cả hai mẹ con Sam đã thành công. Vậy liệu rằng việc em bé là con của Sam và Ly ra đời có phải là một cái cuộc đẹp cho một tình yêu của Sam và Ly hay không? Phía sau còn có sóng gió gì đang chờ đợi gia đình nhỏ hay không? Tất cả sẽ được hé lộ vào các tập tiếp theo, sẽ được phát sóng hàng ngày trên kênh Lý Tử Sam Review nha. Cảm ơn các bạn rất nhiều. Bye bye.